Hello, and welcome to Season 2, Episode 3 of the Everyday Disciple podcast. I am your host, Seth, and my guest today is Justin. Justin, how you doing, man?
I'm doing good. I'm doing really good today. It's Friday, so
yeah,
it's a great day.
That's true. I'm glad that we were able to finally get this together. It's been trying for a while to map this out. You're a very busy man.
Indeed.
So today we're going to talk a little bit about the idea of being an entrepreneur and running your own business, the challenges that go with that, and the role that faith plays in that. But first, I want to give you a chance to kind of introduce yourself to everybody. So you would tell everybody just a little bit, kind of like, what do you do?
Sure.
What's your in a brief version, because we'll talk about it more later, what your business does, and maybe a little bit of how you met Jesus.
Sure. Yeah. Well, 32 years young, although it doesn't feel so young anymore. Just doing life. I have a wife. I have 2 kids. We have 3 pets, 2 dogs, 1 cat. Yes, it's a full house, and it feels full a lot of times. I work for our university, local university, WIU, as a assistant director of creative services and branding. So a lot of licensing stuff, a lot of marketing, a lot of graphic design, which kind of led to why I do a side business that's also very similar to that, called Legendary, which, like you said, we'll kind of dive into it a little more. And like my own faith background, how I kind of came to know Jesus, what my upbringing was. I grew up in a small church, a small American Baptist church, and it was awesome. It was full of great people. It's still full of great people, but it is one of those things where, like, growing up in a small church, you learn so many things about faith, and sometimes that's good or bad for some people. But my experience with it was really awesome because they really took young people and excelled at kind of giving us opportunities to grow, giving us opportunities to lead. They weren't shy about trying new things, so it was a good experience growing up for me. I saw people around me, and I came from a home where, my mom was very, and my grandma were both involved in church. And so, like, I had a good foundation family wise with that. And, I accepted Jesus pretty early. I think I was 10 or 11, give or take. And so I just saw throughout, growing up in a church setting, like, I just saw the evidence of God in a lot of things, and it just made a lot of sense to me. And, honestly, it's one of those things that, like, for me, family wise, I saw God kind of filled that role a lot of times. Not that my family life was bad or anything like that. I always kind of joked. I was like, other people have so much worse family life sometimes growing up. And, like, I always felt pretty blessed with the one that I had. But as I've gotten older, I kind of realized that, that said, there are still things that I struggled with in my family. I don't remember when it was around middle school or so, but, like, mom and dad kind of separated. And so, like, during that time, it was a weird time to figure it out, because it wasn't like, a real bad thing. And, like, we all still kept in contact, that we still all do to this day. Like, there's so many things like that it wasn't like this horrible drag out bad thing by any means, but it was weird to some degree growing up. And so it was one of those things that, like, looking back on it, I guess what I would say, like, my faith bit is that with there's a song too that's like that. Well, where would I be without Jesus? And I think about those lyrics all the time when I hear that song come on, because I'm like, honestly, that's kind of what I feel like my faith background is like, if I didn't have Jesus, there's a very good likelihood that maybe I would have gotten angrier, that I maybe would have done more things. Cause, like, honestly, my testimony up to quite for a long time, I was like, this is a boring church kid testimony. Like, yeah, there's a few things thrown in, but it's not super rocky. It's not super, like, rebellious. It's not super crazy, like, from my perspective looking into it. But I feel like it's one of those, as I've gotten older, I feel like my testimony maybe has gotten better in the sense that like I'm still here. Like it's almost 20 years later. And I think one thing I've noticed is that like not everybody sticks around with Jesus forever. Like not everyone sticks around with church or their faith and like I knew that growing up. There's like that ebb and flow of like, like people clearly have issues and struggle with things and they walk away from faith or deconstruct or do whatever. And I never had that feeling. Like I just really always have felt like God has been there for me. He has blessed me in many regards. He has brought different roles and positions and people into my life. That to me, it just seems very evident that he is a part of it. I mean, I'm like anyone. I sin, I mess up. Yeah. I have continued to struggle with things. I would say the newer part of my testimony is that like I met Kins at the end of high school. So I guess I get to call us high school sweethearts just by a smidge. And like, we've always had a really great relationship, she and I have. And part of that is like, she grew up in church as well. And she saw the value of Jesus and accepted him at an early age. And so like marriage wise and dating wise, like we always put him very much at the forefront of it all. And I feel like, again, not an overly fun testimonial, like, oh, big transit. Like it's just pretty much us just trying to follow Jesus as best as we could. And that said, I just feel like, again, God blessed us in different ways, took us from here to there to new places, and I'd say really where my testimony really starts to get interesting is when we start having kids, because I feel like parenting and adulthood and walking in faith at that point, that is when I really started, because I guess as a kid, this is what, like, to me, faith makes so much sense as a child. And even looking through the eyes of my own children, like, I feel like faith really does make sense. Like, it makes so much sense why Jesus says, like, let the children come, because like kids love him. Like, and he just is a great, like, it all just makes sense when you're little. But then you start throwing the adult things in. It starts getting heavier. You start getting a job. You start having to figure out your finances and all these things. And I think when kids came into play, that's when it was like, it was no longer me and Kinsey doing life together. I mean, when we got married, it was no longer really just me doing life. It was togetherness and figuring out all that. But I think when you throw kids into the mix, then you're like, and you have no time anymore. Like, it is all them. It is all figuring it out. You are tired all the time. You feel broker than you've ever been before. Like, it's just so many things that now compile on themselves. And I think that's where I really realized, like, if anyone's struggling with this, like, that's okay. Because I think the reality is I would not want to sit up here and say, like, I got it all together, because I definitely don't. Like, the first little bit of our first child being born, like, that was wonderful. It was also very stressful and tiring. But I think a year to a year and a half into it, like, I developed this really resentful heart, which I felt really horrible about, because up to this point, I'm kind of like, God, there are people that struggle to even have children. There are people that struggle to have families, why, like, all these things that, like, I feel blessed to have had up to this point. And I just couldn't believe that somehow, like, resentfulness was in there. Like, I was angry that we had a child that was now taking away so much time from Kins and I, that was stressing me out, that I was, just all these things. And it was weird to me why that was something that set in. And so, I would just say that that's kind of one of those things. Like, I worked through a lot of different things, went to a lot of different groups. I mean, you and I were in a group during that time, which is where we kind of got to know each other fairly well. And, I just think that, like, so many things that God has continued to show me, like, I always looked at faith, and whenever I'd be in little groups with high schoolers or helping out or leading other folks, like, I always tried to refer to faith as a roller coaster, because I really do feel like it's a roller coaster. Like, you're up, you're down. Sometimes God wants you to throw your hands up and just, like, go with it. And it's scary when you're going down into the midst of it, into a valley. But I kind of felt like, for whatever reason, like, that point in my life was a roller coaster that had gone down into some sort of valley emotionally. And some of it was like all these different things of feeling out of control. And so, yeah, I mean, it's still an ever going story still, but I think it's in a better place that, interestingly enough, I decided to start a small business in the midst of it all. My wife started a small business before I did. And so like I kind of saw what that looked like, what someone doing that, you know, the roles and all that. And I don't know, it just kind of led to other things and just trying to trust God in the midst of it. And if I'm honest, there's times where it does not make sense to me because I don't think a rational person would continue to have their full-time job, do a side job, and have kids and all. Like it's a balancing act. It really is. And I'm not going to like say that I'm doing it 100% well. Cause I definitely have thoughts later on as far as that goes. Like, I think it is a struggle for sure, especially as a Christian and as someone who wants to follow God and listen to what he's calling us to and leading us to. But again, that whole, like, back to the kids, like they are ever present. And I just think to myself growing up, I'm like, wow, like there's so much responsibility here with what I'm doing or not doing or choosing not to do, even like for their sake. Mm-hmm. And, you know, there's a lot of ways you can dive into that, but that's kind of my story up to this point.
I actually do think that there's a lot of power in that testimony. I know you use the phrase "not very interesting." I don't think. Here's the thing: is like, I feel like that's a thing that a lot of people who were blessed enough to be able to meet Jesus early in their life have. That is this thing of like, well, because I didn't stray super far, that makes and I don't think this is a conscious thought, but it almost becomes like because I didn't stray super far away, I don't have as many tools for like things that I can pull on to affect people. And the reality is like, I mean, there's lots of things that God's using you for, and there's lots, and I feel like the Big C Church is made up in large part by people who think in their brains that they don't have anything exceptional about their testimony. It's like, actually, it's kind of an example of the way it's supposed to be. And it's like, if you never met people who were able to say, actually, yeah, no, God can use you. Yeah. If you stick to it, God will use you. And there's a lot of blessings that come with it. I mean, because the other trade-off, right, is like for people who have the thing of like, oh, I really like, this is how far away I got from God. You also bring that trauma into trying to be a parent and bring it, and like that's like that isn't put on your kids the same way, and allows them the opportunity to have a similar thing of like, I can meet Jesus at an early age and actually be strong in my faith that way. And I think it's encouraging for people who allow themselves to believe that lie to hear like, no, like trust me, God can use it, and it doesn't, because I think a lot of people, I know, like for me, when I was like first getting involved in church, because I was in college when I really started paying attention to my faith, the thing was like the only option is like, well, that works if you like become a pastor, yeah. And I almost thought too, like that was a requirement to become a pastor. And then I started attending the Crossing and met a lot of people who were like, that is not my story. Working for the church. But I mean, honestly, one of the biggest reasons why I want to do this, like I wanted to do this podcast, was because it's the thing about having just anybody who loves Jesus that I can find on here is the thing of like, God uses everybody.
He does.
And that's, I think that's what the story is really about. I think there's a lot of power in that, and being that example for your kids and for just other people who feel that way.
And I mean, you bring up a good point. I'd be lying if I didn't say, like, when you've been around a church culture long enough, and when you've been walking with Christ for that long, like inevitably there is a little bit of you that always feels like, man, 20 years later, like, what have I really done with, like, honestly, I'm in the Jesus years now. Like, I think this is worse because I think this all the time, like Jesus started his ministry at like 30 to 33. So like, I am really in the midst of but again, he's God. So like he is much more capable at doing anything with a ministry related focus than I could ever be. But I say that because like, has the idea of going into ministry or doing some sort of something related directly in the role? Yeah, hundreds of times. Like, and for whatever reason, I feel like I have struggled with that with God, because I feel like I've heard him to some degree, and I feel like I have felt him to some degree call me in a variety of ways to things like that. And I touch the fringes of so many things, which for someone who's a dreamer and loves to think outside the box a lot like me, like I can literally put myself into positions and places and be like, I think I could fit here really well. Like, I love building bridges and all that. So I'm like, I think this could be me. And then I'll build this whole thing up. And then God's like, no, that's not what I want for you right now. And literally that seems like so many times in my life. Like there's been so many things. And I feel like, I don't know if anyone's listening and that resonates with them, but I think there's something to be said. I don't remember who it was that said this, but it really has given me some peace about it. And maybe it was our pastor Clayton, maybe it was someone else. I don't know, but it's always that like, when you're trying to find God's will and all that. And I feel like as a Christian, when you really get deep into it, you tend to also think that more often than not, like, am I in God's will right now? Am I doing what he wants me to do? Am I off track? Because, when you're really into it, like that's kind of where you tend to lie. And that's just one of those things that I feel like doing some of these side things has really brought peace, because I really enjoy getting to help others. And I've seen things and done things with people that are doing good things for God that aren't necessarily doing it just in a quote unquote church setting. Because I think sometimes like the truth is there are only so many people that can be paid by any given church,
right,
or fit in any given church culture. And, at the end of the day, like you need people in every single job area that actually care about God, love him, and want to love other people. I wrote this down to remind myself to bring it up, because, I don't know if you remember saying this, but you said this during one of our things, and it's forever stuck with me. I was like, that is just such an annoyingly good point. Like, it was a very good point that you made.
Okay. So I don't know what you're about to say.
You don't. Surprise. No, but it was in one of our small groups you're talking, and like, like we're dealing with the issues we were dealing with at the time. And like, again, in this very resentful feeling moment, which, a lot of it, as you start to walk through it, you realize it's because like there's this selfish bit that I want to do things my way, God. I want to be viewed in a certain way. I want to do it a certain way, all this, and so you're just kind of selfish at the end of the day, and you said something though, that like, I've said this to Kins, I've said it to myself dozens of times ever since you said it. And maybe you stole it from someone else. I don't know, but it was a really good thing that you said. So here's what you said. You were talking about stuff and you're like, it might not even be about us. Like you were talking about the issues and you're like, this issue might not even be about us. Like it might be God using us to speak to someone else and through their life, like through what we're going through. Like you said something to that degree. And then you also talked about how like people aren't the enemy, our enemy's Satan. That at the end of the day, like, and I think when you start to think like that, especially in a world that is so polarizing right now and so much us versus them and we're right, you're wrong. And I mean, I'm as middle ground as they come as a person. And I feel like the reason I walk more in a middle ground area is because Jesus didn't just decide to sit on one side and say they were right. Like he was like, guess what? I'm God. I'm right. And I care about all of you because I made every single one of you. And I don't know, ever since you said that about like, it might not even be about us. Such an annoyingly correct perspective because you just sit there with that. And you're like, darn it. Like, what am I? Okay. It's probably not even about me, God. Like you're probably doing something because you're God. And the reason I'm not getting this ministry role or something that I've always wanted is because you're doing something in the midst of it. And again, I don't think I'm at that point where I could look back and say like, this is the reason for all the things. This is what led up to it. But it was just such a good point.
Oh, thank you. I can guarantee you neither one of those were originals from me. Yeah, I was quoting somebody. I don't remember who it was, but
I don't know.
I do definitely remember the thing about other people not being the enemy though. 'Cause man, now I really wish that I could remember where I got that from.
I feel
but
like you were elaborating more when you said it.
But it's
that little bit.
Well, because I remember the core of, gosh, what was that guy's name? I'm not going to remember. I'll remember 5 minutes after we're done recording. But it's his quote essentially was, the people who hate you and shame you and deride you for your faith are not your enemy. They're captives of the enemy. And the whole reason that it was all a part of this idea that, like, we hear the phrase, the gates of hell can't stand against. Well, gates are there as a defense. And one of the best tricks that the enemy does on us is he convinces us that we're playing defense against him. And in reality, he's running an insurgency against us. And so the people that you feel like you're in opposition to are captives of the enemy, and we're supposed to be advancing, and God wants us to try and reclaim as many of the captive people as we can. And like I said, I cannot remember exactly who said it, but I remember whenever I heard that the first time, that was a moment of being like, one, I knew that it was true because I immediately didn't like it.
Yes.
The moment I heard it, I was like,
feels that way.
Because like 7 people popped into my head of like people who I was like, I'm not going to pray for them. And it's like, and also I think the other thing that he said in that too was like how much things are filtered through our own perspective. And like, there are probably some people out there who you are that person for them.
Sure. Yeah.
And, you'd really like to think that person would pray for you anyway. And most of the people who like, or at least people who are like me and didn't find Jesus until later, like, I know that I was that person for other people. And I know that part of the reason I did find Jesus is because that people prayed for me anyway.
Yeah.
And I think now as I have gotten older, I've seen some really, really incredible transformations in God that are like, there's no other explanation for the person, the change that you see in the person other than they met Jesus. Yeah. I mean, I can also kind of look back at myself and I know what I was like at like 19 versus now. And trust me, it's not just aging and maturing. Like, there's a lot of, you have to be, the only way I can describe it is like broken down by God repeatedly to get there.
All right, fellas, before we jump back into this episode, I need to take a moment to honor the companies and ministries that make the Foundational Fathers podcast possible. These aren't just sponsors. These are mission partners. They believe in fathers and in families, and most importantly, they believe in the power of the gospel of Jesus Christ.
We got Sasquatch Gun Oil. If you care about your firearms, your tools, your everyday carry, and your gear running the way it is designed to run, you need Sasquatch Gun Oil.
This stuff keeps equipment clean, smooth, and reliable.
Use code FFP316 at checkout for an exclusive Foundational Fathers discount.
Because Jesus still saves, but your rifle and your beard still need oil.
Let's talk about Sabbath Coffee Roasters, the fuel of early mornings, late nights, devotion time, and legacy building conversation. Sabbath Coffee Roasters.
Purpose-driven, faith-forward, and roasted with excellence.
Whether you're opening your Bible, heading to work, or leading your family, this coffee meets you where you are.
Drink coffee, read Bible, and of course, lead your family. And we have pretty good wood turning. So if you're looking for a gift that actually meets something where you want it to meet, not mass-produced pieces of junk, let's talk about pretty good wood turning. Handcrafted tumblers.
Custom wood gifts.
Pieces built with purpose.
Prayer and precision.
This is legacy-level craftsmanship, perfect for dads,
pastors,
mentors,
and leaders. Hide Your Girl Golf Apparel. Now let's talk about looking good while standing for truth.
Yeah, Hide Your Girl Golf Apparel is respectively rebellious,
dangerously drippy,
faith without apology.
Whether you're on the course on the street, or showing up boldly in everyday life, Hide Your Girl helps you grip it, rip it, and look good doing it.
And of course, we have our newest sponsor, Legendary Real Estate Media. Real estate media made easy. So easy.
It's legendary.
Absolutely. And of course, we couldn't do this without the folks over at the Intentionally Uncommon Initiative, where the heartbeat behind what we do is found for foundational fathers.
Because average fathers don't build strong legacies. Intentional, uncommon fathers do.
This initiative exists to push men out of passivity and into purpose.
Through discipleship, leadership, and spiritual direction,
You weren't called to be average.
you're called to be uncommon.
And you can find this particular program on Faith Points TV, amongst other platforms. But this Faith Points TV platform is our broadcast home, our partner in the mission. And of course, it just helps to extend our mission field. Faith Points TV is where
Podcast meets preaching,
testimony meets truth.
families meet faith-centered content.
So if you're watching or listening right now through Faith Points TV, welcome to the mission.
We don't just air here.
We build here. So, fellas, again, every one of these partners fuels the mission so we can continue reaching fathers, families, and the future generations with the gospel of Jesus Christ.
Support those who support the mission. Back the brands that back the kingdom impact.
And speaking of backing, now let's jump back in to the episode.
Which honestly, so that does actually lead kind of into a nice segue into the next point, which is, I know the biggest change for me after I met Jesus was that I think the single biggest thing is like, and I think this is true for everyone, but I think it's especially true for young men, which is the word that we like to use is purpose. But the word that I saw that you used that I really liked was the why. And once part of the reason I was so chaotic when I was younger is I didn't really have a why.
Yeah.
And then Jesus became my why. And then the challenge became, okay, how do I make sure that that's the priority and that's the why in everything that I do? And so trying to keep with the theme towards entrepreneurship and business. I saw a post that you'd had maybe a couple weeks ago where you were talking about for people who want to start a small business. Yep. One of the most important things at the beginning is to figure out your why. Yep. And figure out if that's worth sacrificing for. For you as somebody who's a Christian, who has Jesus as a priority and then a family besides that as another why, and then still also like personal goals and, you know, and everything after that. Can you just talk a little bit about the idea of, as a Christian, why should I care about, like, specifically the idea of, like, if you have an idea of building a business, like what's the why and what's the reason why that if you have the opportunity, you should go into that? Or like if you have the opportunity and the call to it, you should go into that.
I think a lot of it is gonna, like, for me specifically, my why really rolls around with that idea that, again, I've been fighting sometimes with God for what I want, or what, you know, like praying about something like, God, I feel like you're leading me towards this. I feel like this would be a really good way to do something for your kingdom, like all that kind of stuff. And for whatever reason, that never seems to be the case. But then when I kind of started hearing many messages and sermons on this, and then just reading a lot of scripture that really also reflected this, it was like, when I stop fighting with God and I just say, you know, like, I'm going to let him take control of it completely, which is hard because I'm still sometimes wrestling that all the time. But the why really comes back to, like, if God wants us to make disciples, if God wants us to honor him in everything that we do, if God wants us to love other people, like if everything that the Bible says is true, then at the end of the day, whatever we're doing, if we're doing it for God and he's with us, then he's going to be reflected in that. And that's kind of, I mean, that's not super high level, but it's kind of what I started to discover, because there was a bit of me that was also searching in worldly terms too for it as well, for like, how do successful business people start businesses, and like, how do you set goals for yourself? How, like all these things, and some of it very useful. I'm not going to lie to you. Like the more you do I'm a researcher. Like I research the heck out of anything that I do. So like I researched a lot out of figuring this particular bit out. And like, I started to notice that successful people tend to have really good whys for what they're doing. Like they do tend to always go back to like, it has to be a good enough reason to do it. Otherwise, most of us just quit early on. Like, and to be fair, again, I'm one of those people that have a lot of dreams and aspirations, but sometimes procrastinate, like, and more so because I'm afraid of failing, which is most people. And so as I kind of went down that journey of figuring all these things out about myself and how to overgo those things, ironically, two different kinds of people. I read Arnold Schwarzenegger's biography, one of them, and very different, very interesting, but interested because, you know, in a worldly sense, I don't think he sees it as much from a faith perspective. So, you know, grain of salt there. But when you look at the life of someone like that did three very distinctly different things, and probably for a lot of people, you could look at it and say, he pretty much won in all those areas of his life, like as far as getting what he wanted. Now, that's not to say that there aren't other things that as a human he struggled with, but another person that I also looked into a lot and that I follow a lot of his goal setting and things that he discusses on his channels is John Acuff. Like I've read a few of his books as well, and he's very good about talking about setting goals, and the why more so came from him. But Arnold's book, I don't remember what it's titled. I don't think I could say it on this. I think the title is slightly obscene, but it's it basically was like, you know, the Nike idea of just do it. And that's kind of Arnold's focus is just this passion.
I know exactly what book you're talking about.
Yep.
Yeah. I have not read it, but I know. Yeah.
But it's interesting because like, that's what he applies in his whole life is this very, you know, steadfast, I'm just going to do it to the best of my abilities and do it better than anybody else. And now I think though, again, in that time when I was doing some of this, I was doing it more of that was a me in the driver's seat. Like, I'm going to figure this out, God, because clearly some people have figured it out. And I think, you know, there's a bit of it that all goes with the hustle culture. So there's a bit of this that I'm still trying to work out myself in my own life, because social media and hustle culture and small businesses, like, and the reason why a lot of people burn out all the time is because it is hard. And everyone makes it seem like it's easy. There's a reason why people like to do the coaching things of all this. It's because like that's where you can make money, and it doesn't matter because most people will give up anyways. Like, that's the behind the curtain. That's what I've discovered. You start following most of those folks, like most people will give up, and that's unfortunate because that's just human of us to like, it's tough. Man, my family, all these responsibilities, I'm struggling emotionally, mentally, spiritually, and then you give up. You know, I see it with a lot of small businesses. You can kind of field out whether or not you think someone's small business is going to do good or not based on the why, which is kind of why I put that out there, is because like when the why is really weak, you know that at the end of the day, when it gets really hard, because it is really hard, that is mostly what I've discovered, is that there is no easy way to making money. Like, there's networking and there's friends and there's definitely things that like, I think some people are more inclined to having an easier go of it because of those things. It's another behind the curtain that you start to realize that as someone who's also a hardworking type of person in my mind, hard work doesn't really go as far as you want it to. Like, people don't notice you. You kind of have to make people notice you, you know, and that's kind of what Arnold's whole thing was. Look at me, and like, look where that got them. So, you know, again, I'm just taking bits and pieces. That's kind of this journey that led to it. And I know some of it's a little odd, but But what I think I found in the midst of a lot of it too was that like God was still allowing me to dive off on this crazy path a little bit. And he still was more than willing to bring me back to him through the midst of it because, you know, I didn't really know exactly what I wanted it to be when I first started it. So it was just kind of marketing, branding, graphic design, same things I was doing at my full-time job, just doing them for small businesses and like figuring out if I could find people and people that were interested. And there were people, you know, it was hit or miss here on some things, but it did dive into real estate media more so, like for whatever weird coincidence there, it just seems like real estate businesses, it worked better. They needed some things. I had some connections. And so that's kind of what it has dived into. I'm still doing the other stuff and I'm also exploring other options with it. But my why, I know I'm hinting around at a lot of these things, but my why really came down to I wanted to do something different and better for my family. Now, the problem is some people like will jump 100% off the bridge and just commit to that small. And I have not jumped 100% off the bridge for the small business. Like some of that is like not just a me thing, but some of that's family wise. Like, you know, Kins and I have talked about this and like, there's a certain like level of trust in God. And we definitely thought, you know, prayed on that kind of thing. But we also haven't really felt like God has made it super clear to burn all the bridges that I currently have with places. And that's one of those things that I think is tough is because hustle culture teaches us that you have to burn all the bridges, walk away from everything and commit 100% to it. And as a Christian, I just don't know. That just, to me, maybe that is the case with certain personalities. But as I was looking into this, I was just like, you know, up to this point, God has always kind of provided opportunities and people that kind of spoke into my life or whatever for when the next season, so to speak, kind of was moving to that. So my why was basically just doing it for my family. Not super great, but I'll be honest, I think a lot of small business people will relate to this, is that one of my whys at the very beginning was I'd like to get out of debt. And I think that this is a surefire way to make more money since, you know, you cap off at a certain point here. Well, the only logical way to make more money is to do a small business and then you start making more money. But you know, the inevitable is that like you still have expenses in that business. Like, you know, as I've tried to grow things, I've got drones and cameras and computers and stuff. And so like not exactly the cheapest things to just buy and upgrade all the time or keep in stock. But that wasn't, to me, that wasn't a very good why either. Cause like long term, so you want to get out of debt. Like that's why there's so many people coaching, you know, and even John Acuff, he was with Dave Ramsey and stuff, like they coach about how to get out of debt and the debt snowball and all that. And the truth is, the reason is that we don't have very good whys. Like, oh, I'm going to, you know, try to get rid of my debt. And, you know, if it's 10,000, 20,000, like that's such a big number. It takes forever. And like, we'll eventually hit a point where we're like, and then we're done. And the small business is over. Because you went a couple months without making money or people weren't interested or you did life because you're still doing life at that point. So my why was not a good why. And I eventually have evolved my why. And this is a why that keeps me more focused. My why is that I really want to help people and I really like helping people. And I'd like to see where God takes it. So like to me, I feel like that why is a little more open-ended of a why. It's not like it doesn't set me in one, because even if real estate media isn't the bread and butter forever in Legendary, like maybe I dive more down with photography or I decide to go back in the branding bit more. Like, because some people niching is a big deal too with a small business. I even work with a lot of small businesses and try to help them figure out if they can niche, because at the end of the day, it's easier to niche than it is to try to tackle so many things. But yeah, my why is very open-ended at this point, just because I want to see where God takes it. And I feel like it's a little messy, but it's also kind of a little fun that way.
Yeah, I do. One, I understand the thing of being like, maybe I can do something else and make extra money for it. And then you also run into the thing of going, yeah, okay, but now I've had to like turn down overtime at my other job that, and I'm not going to make money for 2 months off of this. So like I understand. And that's me without, children that are, that are waiting. So yeah, no, I get that for sure. I know. Yeah, it is funny to the thing of like, I think it sounds counterintuitive to be like, well, making a profit isn't the reason, isn't the why. I think at first, and for some people it is.
Most people's reasons. Like, truthfully, it's what I find all the time it is. Mm-hmm. And, again, it was mine too. But even some of the things I learned with them, like, it's not a good enough why. Like, at the end of the day, who cares how much money you make? Like, yes, we all do. Obviously, that's why we all go to jobs and do things. But eventually, you're so tired that, like, it doesn't matter if I made an extra $100 this week. It doesn't matter if I made $0. Like, if you're so tired by it, most people I have discovered, like, at some point, because that why is not enough to keep them going forever.
I know, like, for me, my why as far as agreeing to do this is I kind of felt like after a certain point I was getting like hit over the head, didn't have a choice. Like a few years ago, I read a book that called Extreme Ownership,
sure,
by Jocko Willink, and the idea behind it. I mean, it's a secular book, but the core idea behind Extreme Ownership is everything is my fault, even if it's not. And so everything is my fault. Everything's my responsibility. And if even if it's not, that means what that means is like, one, if I see something that needs to be done, I don't get to push it off onto somebody else. And I kept that in my brain. And then I became over the last few years, I started watching a lot of podcasts, got very into a lot of podcasts. And while there's a lot of really good faith-based podcasts out there, I didn't feel like there was one that was speaking to me.
Sure.
And I remember I just kind of got this thing. Like I started to kind of get this thing in my brain of like, well, you do it. And I had 15 different excuses why that wasn't a good idea. A lot of them financial.
Yes.
And then the thing that was really interesting with God is I was like, God, I don't have a way to set this up. I'm not going to do it. Like you got to provide something. And then I had a conversation with Marcus about being a guest on their podcast. And then when I had the conversation a week later with Nick was like, well, there was something got missed in translation. And Nick basically thought that I had pitched doing something like this to Marcus. And so that's what Nick started talking to me about. And I was like, right, we went from 0 to 100 really fast here. And then we had a conversation about it. And Nick was like, no, actually, like all the things I was like, well, I can't afford to set that up or anything. Nick was like, well, actually, we have all that already. I was like, okay, well, now I kind of feel like my why is because it needs to be done. And as far as like your bigger why, right? It's like people do need the kind of service that you're offering.
Yeah. I mean,
and you're able to do it and somebody should do it. So
it's one of those things too, that I think a lot of people, cause this is, again, it's just people, as I was reading these things and discovering it was that, and I'm not going to sit here and say like that I offer the very best service of what I do versus maybe someone else who does it, because I feel like there's always going to be someone better than you. There's always going to be someone worse than you at what you're doing. I try really hard to provide great service for anybody that works with me, that kind of thing. But there was a bit of me early on before even starting to do this. I was like, it is so annoying that I've been doing these types of things for 10 plus years. And yet, why are there people that are 2 years into this, don't know any of the tools I use, don't know any of the marketing, like, the experience is just not mine. And you look at it and you think, they're making how, again, social media tells us what it wants to see, but still you see some of these things and you're like, these people have the same kind of business idea that I have. And they're just like rolling the dice, it feels like, to whatever. And it's only kind of quality wise. And yet, they're claiming that people are paying them pretty darn good for what it is. And, you start to realize that the difference between a lot of people is like, are you willing to just do it? Again, the whole Nike kind of just do it bit is true, is that when you let fear stop you from doing it, you just don't do it. You're just afraid of, what if I fail? And, John Acuff, like, this was really helpful as I was kind of diving into this and following along with some of, the podcasty bits that he does. And he does like, a lot of free things that, inevitably will bring you more into his bit. And like at the time, again, I just financially was not in a place to be like, yeah, I need coaching. I would like to maybe someday, but I think I was also intuitive enough that I could like see some of what was happening in between the midst of it to give me enough to be like, okay, some of this is just, I just have to start doing it. It's messy. And that's one of those things when I work with people, and they have a small business idea, some of it is really trying to just encourage them just to try. Because a lot of it, I work with some, I got a buddy that connected me with our local CEO program. So it's like high schoolers that are entrepreneuring and figuring out small business ideas as one of their class credits in high school. It's very cool. And it spoke to me, obviously. So I was like, yes, I would love to help out with that. And as I'm talking with some of these, like some of these kids have really great ideas. And there was one student that I'm talking to, and like in my mind, I was thinking like his biggest problem at the moment with this is that he's just waiting for it all to get ready, which is again, like my own problem starting my own stuff was I was like, I'll just wait until I've got all the right equipment. I'll just wait until I've got, like you said, like the right opportunity to do this. And sometimes those don't come until you start talking about them, putting them out there, asking people, because, that's a lot of it really is who you know. People say that all the time. And there is some truth in that, is because if you keep it to yourself, nobody knows. And so then I kind of just started putting it out there and people started knowing that I was doing these things. And so even on social media, as I started putting things out there, people started listening and I started like, oh, you got this thing. But back to the student, he had really great ideas. And the one thing I'm noticing is just that, like, he had this idea for this business that works well in winter. And he was just like, well, I'm not sure I really want to drive around and do stuff in winter. And it was like, but your whole business will do its best in wintertime. You should probably start that business right now and start selling the product now in winter, because, summertime, not as big a need for your product then. Like, so just some of those things that when I'm listening to people, like that's kind of that strategic bit of it, that I'm listening to what I'm hearing. And some of it really is like, I'm afraid to begin because, and sometimes it's a real silly reason. Sometimes it's a real personal reason. Sometimes it's a real, like, this will require sacrifice of your time. For me, that's kind of the juggling bit of all this that I'm still very much trying to figure out some days, is that, my kids are only going to be little for so long. And so a lot of times I'm way late up at night doing this stuff, creating stuff, working on marketing bits or design bits, because I don't want to miss it when they're awake. And so that's kind of the tough bit, is that some of it is me sacrificing comfort and sleep. And that's rough some days, because I still know that I got to get back up 6 hours later and start the grind all over again.
It's actually a wonderful segue into my next question for you. Perfect. Which I did want to talk a little bit about in this process of building it. You got young kids. I think between the kids and the pets and the wife, you named like 6 things that are relying on you back at your house. What do you think have been the biggest challenges in the process, as far as balancing your life and the fact that you have a full-time job and trying to do this, at trying to do this business at the same time? And where do you feel like you've been able to lean on God the best, or maybe like these are things I need to be leaning on him with more?
Definitely. Yeah, no, this is honestly, I'll be honest with you. I'm kind of glad that, and I feel like maybe this is a God thing that we had this keep getting pushed back and back, because if we had done this a few months prior to today, I don't think I was as in good of a spot to talk about this particular struggle that I've been dealing with, because honestly, I was struggling with it. And again, being very headstrong of God, I can juggle all these things just fine. You just need to bring the opportunities in and like make it easier so that then it'll be less stressful and all. And, you know, planning it out, basically. I'm planning out what I want God to do and trying to treat him like a vending machine. And that's not how it works. And I know that, but yet somehow I've again stumbled into the problem that a lot of us stumble into in our faith journey with God of like, you know, and so for me, the issue is, yes, how do I prioritize all these things? And that has really required me to set up boundaries somewhat. Mm-hmm. So like boundaries is the first one, because it didn't really have a lot of boundaries starting off. And it was just like more money for the debt problem. Yay. Mm-hmm. But then, you know, again, not a good enough reason. And if you're building a small business, you start investing in things that aren't just the debt. And so then you got to see like, oh, this is long term. So money's not everything with that. But then it becomes this, like, as the kids slowly get older and they're not just toddler age anymore, they're actually like very cognitive of what dad is now doing. It's not just a like, I'm doing this while they're little and in their car seats anymore kind of thing. We're now at the point where one is like 3.5 and the other one's close to being 6. So they're at very impressionable ages. And they're also at ages, the 6-year-old is, where, well, you just like to work all the time and you don't really care about what I'm doing. And oh my gosh, daggers to the heart when that gets said. And I'm not going to lie, like growing up, I always thought to myself, like, I don't want to be the type of person, like there's a Cast and Crowns song that's all about that. And I always thought to myself, I'm never going to be that person. Then I think about how that song goes. And I'm just like, dang it, I'm being that guy in the song. I'm building a sandcastle on crashing waves. And I'm like, oh. And so it gives me pause, because I feel like, again, letting the why adapt and evolve is a big deal with this. And like, for me, I think my why is that, you know, I want to do the best I can for my family and those around me. Family, obviously, being the bigger one, but also like if I'm honoring God, like they're going to see that through this. So there's a bit of me that setting up those boundaries has been a big bit. And my wife would say I'm still not very good at setting those up. And she's not wrong. I'm still working on some of those things. But some of it is kind of, you know, what am I actually capable of doing? Which I feel like to some degree, like compared to what I see others doing as far as marketing, design and stuff, like I can work at a very high level for a very long time. But I also know what burnout feels like. And I feel like that is the problem. And that's kind of where I was like, a couple months back, I was in a big midst of burnout. So like there was a bit of me that was a lot more jaded about all this, because you do something for so long, you get burnt out, and then you get resentful again. Resentful coming back in for a different reason this time. You know, you're resentful now at these opportunities that God has given you. You're like, God, I didn't want this. And he's like, no, you did. This is just now what it is now. Like you didn't realize that this all came with it. But so boundaries is a big one, but then realizing that boundaries aren't enough either, that I also have to keep God in the midst of all this. And so that's been something I've kind of been doing better at. And, you know, one of my goals this year, I was like, I have never read the whole Bible all the way through. Like, it's just one of those things I've never done. And, you know, I don't look down on anybody that hasn't, because obviously since I hadn't, I was like, hey, you know, it's all good, whatever. But I thought to myself, I was like, the bigger bit of that's because you're being in his word consistently and daily. And like, I don't want to just treat God and Jesus like I'm a fan of them when it entices me or when it's convenient to me. And I think, you know, with this, as I was going down this journey, I started thinking about like, I need to prioritize that even more, because with my kids, they're starting to see that. And they're starting to see, they're starting to see, like, does dad prioritize hard work and success more than he values God? And that's kind of that subtle thing that started to creep in, that I started to notice. And like many times where I could have just pumped in more hours, made a little bit of extra here and there, taken on more projects as a result, like it gave me pause, because I was like, as a Christian, money's not everything in this. And I had, come across so many other Christian small business owners as well. And like, I'm thinking, I don't want to be the type of person that kind of helps build this culture with other folks too, of like hustle, 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 disregard all of the rest and the Sabbath that God teaches us that we should be doing. And so that's my struggle as of late. That's been what I'm working on, really a lot harder, because I feel like long term, it's got to be a part of that why too, because otherwise burnout's going to be inevitable. And maybe not burnout from me, maybe burnout from, my wife and my kids. Like, and I don't want to see that. I want to see them be like, yeah, he prioritized a lot of things, but he prioritized us and his faith, and was willing to sacrifice, convenience sometimes over that.
Yeah. I mean, I can respect that. Even, whether it's attached to the business or just like workaholicism, I get that. I get that feeling.
Yeah.
And I know. So in a couple of weeks, I'm going to have my father on as a guest.
Sure.
I know one of the things that I've said repeatedly for it, as far as like best lessons I learned from him, was he had an insane work ethic, but also had the like willingness to, I think maybe the biggest gift that he gave me was he allowed me to see him have the moments where he had to say that he was wrong about something. And a lot of that had to do also with like him just right around the time that I was like getting ready to go into high school, he just made like a massive career shift.
Sure.
Because, and a big part of that was like time and availability. That, I don't know, it for me, as I got older, that gave me permission to have that myself too. Of like, whereas I think if it had just stayed, working 70 hours a week continuously my entire life, then like when I came into some of those moments, I don't know if I would have felt like I had the permission to make those changes myself. I would have almost felt like, well, this is like, if I'm trying to be the man who's helping my example, then that's what I've got to do. And like, and don't get me wrong, there's some times where like, that's just kind of the way it is. you have, I hate using this word because I think it gets overused, but there are occasionally times where it's like, I have to suck it up and just work a lot right now.
Yeah.
That's easier for me to say because I don't have a wife and kids, but like there are just moments where it's like, listen, the work has to get done, but being able to say, like being able to say, and I think especially because the thing you talked about was like, I asked God for these opportunities, is you kind of feel like you're not allowed to say no now.
That would be one thing it just was popping in my head as you're saying that, is that it's really valuable to note in all of this, the value and the power of saying no. Mm-hmm. Because if I'm honest, like, again, before I ever delved down this role of trying to do a side business while also still having a job and all the other bits of life, I'm a big people pleaser. And so
Same.
I'm just telling everyone every little bit of my element of who I am. But when you combine them all, you start to see what I do. That's why he struggles with so many things. I get it now. That's why I need Jesus. You're starting to understand why I need Jesus. But like I have realized that the con of people pleasing, the bad thing of people pleasing, is that it doesn't always fix everything. Like in my mind, again, I thought hard work and all this would get noticed and that it would lead to better and bigger things. And yes, to some degree it does and has in some ways. But honestly, there's been some times where saying no has led to actually bigger things because I started prioritizing certain and that's not saying that I got lazy in certain respects. And it's not saying that I started saying, nope, I'm just going to do all this stuff instead. Like, it's still a juggling act, but it did kind of come down to this, like, I don't take on a lot of littler jobs that I could probably take on. Like, I really did, when I went out about doing this, I decided to make it sustainable. And the fact that, like, if I were to ever 100% dive into this, could I live off of it? And the answer is no, not yet. But that's part of it too, of like, if I'm going to take away time from my family, it can't just be for a one-off or a really low end kind of thing that like takes 5 hours, but doesn't pay as much as like something that took a couple hours and really was valuable to someone. So that, that's some of it. Why I've tried to figure this out is that when I listen to some people's small business ideas, I know that they're probably going to get burnt out real fast because they're really just like looking for all the low hanging fruits. And it's really hard. And that's not to say that some businesses have to do that. Like, you have to start at the very bottom and accept anything to get something to move on. But I also thought in the back of my mind, I was like, I do have this full-time job that pays the bills. So again, if it's just to kind of help pay off the debts and see what happens and maybe build it into something else as time goes on, I don't really have to worry.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, God has already provided, like the sparrows. He took care of me. This is just extra fruits. So yeah, it kind of goes back to just really prioritizing that if God's really in the midst of it and he's really in control of it, he's going to take care of it. Even if I tell people no, which, that sucks sometimes, but sometimes I hear ideas and I'm like, so many hours of my time that's going to be wasted for not much of anything. And honestly, there's other people that could take care of it. So it's fine to say no.
So before we get into our closing stuff, you're going to take a minute and really fully explain what your business is, what it does, like the kind of people that would be your clients. And then also like let people know how they can get in touch with you, where they can find where they could find your business if it is a thing that they want to use.
Yeah. No, I guess hopefully, if anything, hopefully I've given you a sense of the strategy that I tend to, the overthinkingness that I even throw into this, but it's strategy based. So it's like, at the end of the day, branding is what I started all this off of. So like branding being marketing, graphic design, every bit of how you build a business. Like, when you're deciding stuff, it's not just a logo, because that's that low hanging fruit that I'm talking about, is that it's really easy. People just want like a logo or something for socials and then they're done. And when I started Legendary, like, I really wanted it to be something where people were like, oh, it's a whole brand. Like, when I do this, how I talk on social media, how I say things here or there, that's a part of the brand. Like, marketing matters because it gets my name out there and people. So like, I really ask a lot of questions when people come to me for branding help or advice. Well, not for advice, but more so when they come to me, looking to start a business, build a business, rebrand a business. So that's one big part of it. The marketing, the graphic design, the branding, that's all one big bit. I build packages out for people. Some of that's been if they wanted a website, like I've done a website for someone that kind of consisted. They already had a little bit of the other bits of stuff. And those are really big and they take quite a while. Like those I tend to plan out, a month, maybe 2 months, depending on what they are, like, cause they take time. So I don't tend to take a lot of those on. And, like I said, the bread and butter has kind of become real estate media. So I actually, for realtors, I go out and take pictures of their houses. I video, I have a gimbal for smooth cinematic look. Got drones. It's actually why I really wanted to dive into that element, was like, I like drones, and that led to a whole bunch of researching and getting licensed to do it and all this and learning. And, but that's leading to other things too. Like tomorrow I'm actually, going with a photographer, and I'm helping with drone work and with video work. And so like there's a bit of me now that's like, could wedding drones and videos be a part of the whole thing? I don't like niching. If anyone has noticed this about me up to this point, I don't personally like niching. I like trying lots of things, but that's a big part of it too, is the media elements. And then photography itself, but it's also one of those things that, you know, could I charge less? Could I do onesie twosies for people? Yes, but it takes so much time to do some of that. So that's kind of one of those, again, I like to build things into packages and brands so that, yeah, it might cost more for some people, but on the other hand, it's way worth my time, and I can be very, very strategic with folks. Because at the end of the day, that's what I really want for people, is like, I want your small business to feel like, wow, he put a lot of time and effort in this. And one of the things that I really loved working with a previous client was they were like, wow, you really shared lots of, like the same things I've talked about to some degree. Like I try to share similar things regarding that to their small businesses and how they can, you know, find their whys and keep at it. And, you know, any questions that they might have, I don't try to hide those behind paywalls or other stuff. You know, I just try to build that into when we're doing a job for them, how can we better their small business, you know, so that way the relationship's there for later in case there's other jobs or other people that they think, hey, you know, I could work with you. So yes.
Okay.
I do a lot of things: branding, marketing, real estate, media, photography, videography. It's a lot of media based bits, a lot of design based bits, a lot of strategy. And you can find me thelegendary.com, and dairy, legendary, dairy being DERRY, because that's my last name. Yeah.
I don't know if people could see it on there, might not be able to see it.
Yeah. But it's just a little fun pun. It's also my son's middle name. So that's kind of one of those other fun things. We used it at our wedding. So it's kind of, Legendary's been around with our family for a while. And it makes a good business name too. People think it's funny or talk about it or whatever when we bring it up. So, but yeah, you can get in contact me there. I'm also on Instagram quite a bit. Legendary Media, Legendary Brand, Legendary Photography. And I'd love to work with anybody. Like I said, I definitely am one of those people. I am somewhat selective because I do try to make this worth time and effort. But when we get the right fit, like, it's definitely something that I think people enjoy it. And it definitely brings them value.
Yeah. I've seen the Instagram page of stuff. It's good. It's good content, even if you don't have a small business, I think. So yeah, I encourage people to try to connect if they can.
Yeah.
So, okay. Well, my closeout question for everybody is always the same. Right now, favorite Bible verse and why?
That is a good one. Well, I've had several as of late that I haven't really memorized them. Just they've been coming in and out as I've seen them. But honestly, I've always liked Isaiah 40. I don't. It's in the is up with me. Like, I've always liked that verse, just because even now, you know, that whole roller coaster bit of life, like, I feel like it's one of those, God's there when you need strength. God's there when you're feeling down and tired. And to be fair, sometimes I feel tired a lot as a result of those things, but he picks me back up, keeps me going.
Okay. I like that one. I like that.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't.
No,
I feel like my mind. We talked so many other things that then when we switched it, I don't have it at the tip.
Okay, we had Logan on here, and I don't know what I don't remember how long it was in the final cut, but he probably sat in silence for 2.5 minutes before he answered. it's all right. It's all right. At least I've started kind of being able to remind people that we're going to do that, but I haven't done the best job of doing that.
Well, and if anything, I mean, I would just take that as I've walked with God for a long time, but I'm still a work in progress. If anything, that's how I would take that. That's
kind of why I
God's
like
not
doing it.
dead.
It's kind of why I like doing it, because everybody, even the people that I've let know, they're like, okay, yeah, I've went. And then you ask them, and they're like, I don't remember it now. It's like, neither do I.
The low hanging fruit would be to quote John 3:16, and like,
Sure,
that's not.
so far nobody's gone with John 3:16.
I mean, it's a great verse, but it's the low hanging fruit. It's like, yeah, that's the problem though, is that I really do like that Isaiah one. That again.
All right, man. Well, thank you very much for coming on. I really appreciate it. For everybody who's watching, please, if you haven't already, like, subscribe. We'd love to get in touch with you. Comments, sections. This has been season 2, episode 3 of the Everyday Disciple podcast, and we will see you next week.
Awesome.
Bye, everybody.